Hi there, you're watching Reddit Confessions. Get ready, because this one's going to stay with you. Her shoes were dry. That was the first thing I noticed when she stepped inside at 2:17 a.m. The floor was soaked. My coat was dripping where I'd left it hanging. The wind outside was howling like it wanted to rip the roof off. Rain had been coming down in waves for hours. But her shoes, beige wedges she never wore in bad weather, were spotless. Not even a water stain. I was sitting on the bottom step of the stairs, phone off, heart somewhere near my throat, staring at her like I was seeing a stranger who had used my wife's key. She looked surprised to see me awake. "I thought you'd be asleep," she said, brushing invisible rain from her shoulder. I didn't say anything, just stared. She didn't shake out her umbrella. She didn't have an umbrella. She started walking toward the hallway, her usual post-lie route, when I finally asked it. "Where were you?" She blinked. "Work drinks. You know this." I pointed to the clock. "Work drinks end at midnight. It's almost dawn." She looked at her wrist instinctively. No watch. Her smartwatch had been charging for days. "I didn't want to wake you," she mumbled. "You didn't," I replied. "The storm did. And the silence after." She tilted her head, gave me that familiar look, the one that says you're making something out of nothing. The look that says I'm tired, not guilty. But her shoes were dry, and I couldn't unsee it. You see, when people talk about betrayal, they always think it's the affair itself that cracks the world in half. The lipstick, the phone calls, the whispers, the lies. But sometimes, it's something stupid, something simple, something small that doesn't make sense. Like shoes that should have been wet. Because if the shoes are dry, it means she didn't walk from her car. She was dropped off, and I never heard a car leave. That's when I said it, calmly, coldly, and with the weight of 6 years pressed into every word. "Go ahead. Keep walking. But the moment you turn down that hallway, the moment you act like we're still us, this marriage is over. That's it. You're not coming back." She froze, just for a second. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. "You're being dramatic, Cal." I didn't move. She shook her head, walked down the hallway, and disappeared into the bathroom. And that's when I knew. I wasn't being dramatic. I was already gone. The house was silent the next morning. Not peaceful silent, but the kind of stillness that hums just beneath your skin. The kind where you know something's wrong, even if the furniture hasn't moved. She was already gone when I woke up. No note, no text, not even the sound of the shower dripping. Just the faint scent of whatever fragrance she'd started wearing lately, spicy, expensive, unfamiliar. It lingered in the air like someone else had been in the room. I dragged myself to the kitchen, made coffee out of habit, and stood staring at nothing in particular while the machine hissed and sputtered. I thought about her shoes again, the wedges that had no right being dry. I thought about how she walked past me like I was furniture, like I was some decorative item from our wedding registry that no longer matched her aesthetic. The mug burned in my hand, but I didn't sip. I just kept replaying everything. And then, I remembered the laundry. She had come home with that bag, same leather one she always used for overnights. And she'd gone straight to the bathroom, which is connected to the laundry closet. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe proof I was losing my mind. I opened the closet door and stared at the washer. There was nothing in it. That struck me as odd. She always tossed her things in. She hated the idea of stale smells clinging to worn clothes. But the hamper next to it was empty too. It was the noise that caught my attention. A soft clink. Metal against metal. I knelt down and pulled the washer slightly forward, just enough to reach behind. My fingers scraped against the back wall until they landed on something cool and smooth. I tugged it out. It was a keycard, dark navy blue with a white logo I didn't recognize, partially scratched. I flipped it over. Room number 714. There was no hotel name, no address, just a sticker on the back that said, "Property of Haven Suites." Haven Suites wasn't a place we'd ever stayed. It wasn't a place we'd ever even talked about. And I knew every single hotel within 100 miles. Because I was the one who used to plan our anniversaries. I was the one who booked stays with rose petals and spa packages and overpriced wine I could barely afford just to see her smile. And now, I was holding the evidence of a secret stay. Without me. I should have sat down. I should have breathed. But instead, I started searching the house like a man who'd just realized he didn't know where he lived anymore. Her nightstand, locked. That was new. Her bathroom drawer, empty. Just an unused toothbrush and a lipstick I'd never seen before. I opened the junk drawer in the hallway, the one she always told me not to bother with, and found a receipt crumpled and stuffed beneath a broken phone charger. Haven Suites. Room service, $64. 2 meals, 2 drinks, 1 romantic turn-down service. The name on the receipt wasn't hers. It was under Juliet Browning. She wasn't Juliet. I wasn't Romeo. I don't know how long I sat on the floor, just staring at that fake name. I kept thinking, what kind of person uses a different name for a hotel check-in? Who was she with? How long had this been going on? Was this a one-time thing, or had I just been too scared to look until now? But the worst thought, the one I couldn't unthink, was that maybe she'd already left me a long time ago and just hadn't bothered to tell me. Maybe I was just convenient. A place to keep her mail and hide her lies. Later that afternoon, she came home, acted like everything was fine, said her team retreat was exhausting and that she might nap early. I didn't say a word. I just nodded and asked if she wanted tea. She said yes. While the water boiled, I slipped the receipt into the side pocket of my wallet and the keycard into my coat. I needed time. I needed a plan. I needed to know if she'd done this once, or if I'd been living in the aftershocks of an earthquake that started years ago. And maybe, if I was brave enough, I'd finally book a room of my own. Not to cheat, just to breathe. It took me 2 days to work up the nerve. 2 days of pretending everything was normal. Like the woman who sat across from me at dinner, texting under the table and faking yawns, wasn't actually Juliet Browning at Haven Suites. 2 days of smiling while my insides were crumbling, as if every sound from her phone didn't feel like a needle dragging across my nerves. I rehearsed everything I'd say, over and over, in the car. I'm just here to check something. I believe I left something last week. I think my wife stayed here. But when I pulled up to Haven Suites, a sterile-looking glass building surrounded by trimmed hedges and cold gray pavement, the words caught in my throat like fishhooks. I sat in my car for 40 minutes before I even stepped inside. The lobby smelled like artificial citrus. The front desk clerk barely looked up when I approached. I gave her the key card, said I might have dropped it while attending a conference there. She smiled with robotic courtesy, tapped something on her keyboard, and asked for ID. I had no idea if they'd give me anything, but when she glanced at the screen, something shifted in her expression. It wasn't suspicion. It was discomfort, like she recognized something she wasn't supposed to share. She leaned in slightly and whispered, "Room 714 is occupied." Then she paused, eyes darting to a second monitor. At least, it's been rebooked under the same profile. She didn't say more. She couldn't, but that was all I needed. I thanked her, walked to the elevator like I had a purpose, and rode it in silence. My reflection in the brushed steel walls looked like a man I didn't recognize. Hair unwashed, eyes sunken, mouth twisted like I was bracing for a crash I couldn't stop. When the elevator dinged on the 7th floor, I hesitated. The hallway was unnervingly quiet. Room 714 sat at the far end, its number barely visible under the fluorescent buzz. I don't know what I thought I'd do. Knock, kick the door in, walk away. But when I got closer, I heard it. Music. Muffled, low-tempo R&B. The kind you'd hear in dim lounges where hands slide under tables and promises are broken in whispers. Then laughter. Hers. I knew her laugh. I knew every version of it. The one she gave co-workers, the one she used with my mom, the one she saved for when I actually made her belly laugh. But this one was light, seductive, private. This one didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't knock. I couldn't. I just stood there, one hand halfway to the door, and felt my ribs tighten like they were trying to keep my heart from escaping. I backed away slowly, my shoes barely making a sound against the hallway carpet. I left the hotel, got in my car, and sat with the engine running for 10 minutes. Not moving, not thinking, just knowing. She hadn't even tried to hide it. She was there again. Same alias, same room, and she was laughing. With him. But here's what broke me. When I finally got home, hours later, she was already in the kitchen, hair wet, wearing an oversized hoodie I hadn't seen before, stirring something in a pot and humming like her world hadn't just erased mine. "You okay?" she asked without turning around. I mumbled something about errands and dropped my keys in the bowl by the door. She didn't even flinch, didn't even ask where I'd been. That's when I knew. It wasn't guilt that made her act normal. It was indifference. She didn't think she was betraying me. She didn't think she owed me anything anymore. I wasn't her husband. I was her roommate with a shared mortgage and a fading signature on paper she planned to replace. That night, I went into the garage and pulled out a box I hadn't touched since we moved in. A dusty thing filled with my old camera gear, some college photos, and a leather notebook I once used to jot down every reason I loved her. I read through it in silence. And when I got to the last page, the words blurred with tears I didn't realize were falling. She makes me feel seen. But now, I was invisible in my own home. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I made the call. I couldn't sleep, not because I was afraid of what I'd learn, but because I already knew too much. The silence in our bedroom had grown teeth. She lay beside me, sound asleep, breathing evenly like someone with nothing to fear. Meanwhile, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, as if it could somehow rewind time if I just watched it long enough. The name on that hotel receipt wouldn't leave my head. Juliet Browning. A name that didn't belong to my wife, but clearly fit her better than mine ever did. And that was the worst part. Not that she was hiding, but that she was comfortable hiding. Earlier that evening, while she showered, I took the crumpled receipt from my coat pocket and scanned it again. The bottom had a reservation confirmation number. I took a chance. I typed it into a hotel review site's back-end tool for rewards members, an old trick I knew from my brother, who used to travel for a living. To my surprise, it worked. Juliet Browning had a guest profile, and listed under preferred contact was a phone number, a number with a local area code. I copied it down, saved it under a blank name in my phone, and spent the next 5 hours rehearsing what I might say if someone answered. But no version made sense. No version ended with closure. Still, I called. Once. Twice. The third time, someone picked up. But it wasn't her. It was a man. Calm, confident. His voice smooth and lazy, like someone who wasn't used to rushing anything. Yeah, he said. No hello, no name. I didn't breathe for a second. Then I said, I'm looking for Juliet. A pause. Then laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not confused. Knowing. You mean Riley, he said. Right. My whole body went cold. He knew her real name. He wasn't surprised by the question. He wasn't shocked. Which meant this wasn't just a fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was established. I felt my voice shaking. Who is this? He chuckled again. You must be the husband. Silence. He didn't apologize. He didn't hang up. He didn't even seem concerned. I didn't think she'd actually give you the receipt, he added. She said she threw it out. My legs gave out, and I sat down on the cold bathroom tile without realizing it. You've done this before? I asked, though I already knew the answer. All I'll say, he replied, is that your wife doesn't seem very married when she's with me. Then he hung up. Just like that. No name. No explanation. Just the dull, final tone of a line going dead. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, the phone still in my hand, my chest collapsing inward. There was something so methodical about it all. So casual. He knew who I was. He knew what I was. And it didn't bother him in the slightest. Because he knew she wouldn't leave. Because he knew I wouldn't either. Not yet. The next morning, Riley walked into the kitchen humming a Fleetwood Mac song. She made coffee, poured me a cup without asking, like she hadn't just spent the weekend in someone else's arms. I watched her hands. The same hands that used to hold mine in grocery store lines and under blankets on rainy mornings. Those hands were busy stirring cream into her mug, like they had no memory of me. She looked at me, smiling softly. You okay? You look tired. I smiled back, and something inside me cracked. Because I realized I'd been chasing a ghost, trying to hold together a version of her that no longer existed. Maybe she never did. And in that moment, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt outdated, like something she had quietly outgrown, but never had the courage to donate. I wish I could tell you I planned it, that I walked into that confrontation with a rehearsed script, a solid backbone, and righteous fury. But the truth is, it happened in the most pathetic way imaginable. I was holding a broken cabinet hinge. It had snapped off the pantry door earlier that morning. I don't know why I bothered to fix it. Maybe I needed something in my hands, something to distract me from the volcanic pressure building behind my ribs. But there I was, screwdriver in one hand, metal hinge in the other, when she walked into the kitchen still in her robe, holding her phone like it was an extension of her body. She didn't even glance at me, just breezed past, poured herself oat milk, and tapped the screen like nothing in the world could possibly matter more than whatever was on it. I stared at her for a long time, and then I said it. Plain. Quiet. Final. Who's the man from room 714? That was the moment she stopped. The moment the glass nearly slipped from her hand. Her back stiffened. She turned her head just enough for me to see the side of her face, but not enough to meet my eyes. Excuse me. I said, room 714. Haven Suites. You've been there. More than once. Stillness. Cold, suffocating stillness. She finally turned. Her lips parted, her brows drawn together like someone assembling a lie with surgical precision. But before she could speak, I added, he knew your name. Your real name. He answered the phone. Her jaw twitched. You called him? Yes. That's when it cracked. Not her lie, but her posture. Her shoulders dropped, like she'd just lost a fight she hadn't even started. She set the glass down slowly. The sound of it touching the counter was deafening. You weren't supposed to know, she said. It wasn't denial. It wasn't even apology. It was logistics. That sentence didn't come from a woman caught off guard. It came from someone who was disappointed that her system had failed. I stepped closer, and I asked the only question that mattered. How long? She took a breath. 8 months. I nodded, slowly. My stomach felt like it had collapsed in on itself. Why? Her response? A shrug. A literal, actual shrug. Like a teenager caught skipping class. Like I had just asked her why she forgot to buy milk. I don't know, Cal, she said. I felt stuck. You're always so careful, so cautious, so safe. You wake up and drink the same tea, wear the same 3 shirts, tell the same dry jokes. I winced. So it's my fault you cheated? No, she said quickly. Not entirely. But I needed to feel something different. Something not expected. I stared at her in disbelief. You needed excitement. So you lied. For almost a year. She didn't flinch. You were never supposed to find out. And there it was again. That logistics tone. That matter-of-fact delivery that made it clear I wasn't a person to her in this scenario. I was a variable. Something to manage. I stayed, I said softly. Through your layoffs. Through your father's hospital bills. I skipped vacations to help with your startup idea. I drove you to and from that physical therapist twice a week for 6 months when you had back issues. I never said you were a bad husband, she interrupted. You just said I was boring. She opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time in a long time, she looked genuinely lost. Like she couldn't figure out how to spin this back into her favor. I was going to end it, she muttered. Eventually. I just didn't know how. You just did. The silence that followed wasn't explosive. It wasn't theatrical. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring because your brain is suddenly begging for anything else to hear. A car horn. A siren. Anything but this stillness. And then she said the thing that confirmed every fear I hadn't wanted to name. I didn't think you'd leave. You don't do things like that. I didn't respond. Because she was right. I don't do things like that. I don't slam doors. I don't storm out. I don't throw rings onto kitchen counters. But I do notice when someone stops loving me. And I do remember the moment they make that choice permanent. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't end with the truth. It doesn't end with the confession or the fight or the awkward silence over half-eaten leftovers. No, betrayal keeps echoing. Every time she walked into a room after that night, I felt it humming through the walls. Her voice sounded like a recording on loop. Her words, you don't do things like that, they stuck to my ribs like wet cement. She wasn't afraid I'd leave. Because she didn't believe I could. She was right. Until she wasn't. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't shout. I didn't touch her. I didn't even ask for another conversation. That morning, she kissed me on the forehead like she always did before heading to work, her lips barely brushing my skin like they were fulfilling a chore she no longer enjoyed. I smiled and said, have a good one, with the same ease I'd use on a neighbor I barely knew. She didn't notice the difference. But I did. As soon as the door closed behind her, I stood completely still for 5 full minutes, listening, making sure the garage door had shut, that her car had pulled down the street. And then, I opened the drawer next to the fridge, pulled out the envelope I'd hidden there since the night of the phone call, and started phase 1 of my quiet exit. Most people think leaving a relationship is one big moment. A suitcase slammed shut, a slammed door, a screaming match in the driveway. But that's not how it happens for people like me. For people like me, it's measured. Precise. We vanish by inches. That day, I canceled the joint Amazon account. I transferred every personal file from our shared cloud to a private external drive I'd been slowly filling over the last few weeks. I logged into the bank and removed my name from every subscription she didn't even know I was paying for. Gym memberships, streaming services, premium grocery delivery that never once had my name on the boxes. By lunch, I had a burner phone. By dinner, I had a mailbox registered at a co-worker's place across town. She didn't notice a thing. That night, she suggested we order Thai food and watch something light together. I nodded, ordered her usual drunken noodles, and queued up a sitcom we used to laugh at before we became background noise to each other's evenings. She curled up next to me like muscle memory, her head on my shoulder, and said nothing about what had happened the day before. She wanted to pretend the confrontation had been an ugly little blip. She wanted to skip to the part where I quietly accepted her betrayal and slipped back into the supporting role she'd assigned me years ago. So I let her. Because people who think they've won stop checking the scoreboard. 3 days later, I found something that flipped the final switch. I was in the basement, technically looking for a storage bin to pack away old photo frames, when I found a tote bag tucked under a pile of dusty winter coats. Inside, a second phone. Not locked. No passcode. Just sitting there, almost staring me. I didn't hesitate. Messages. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. She wasn't cheating with a man. She was cheating with multiple men. Different names. Different cities. Hotel meetups. Saved photos she never sent me. Entire conversations about how safe her husband was. How predictable. How he wouldn't even notice if she disappeared for the weekend. One message stood out. A thread titled Plan C. She had written, "Worst case, I'll just take the house. He won't fight it. He never fights anything." My throat went dry. I sat there on the concrete floor, staring at the glow of the screen while the rest of my world went cold. She wasn't just unfaithful. She had strategized for my erasure. This wasn't emotional confusion. This was long-term manipulation dressed up in passive-aggressive silence and sleepy forehead kisses. So I added one final item to my checklist. I wouldn't just leave. I'd make sure when she finally looked for me, all she'd find was absence. No goodbye, no voicemail, just nothing. Because that's what she'd trained herself to see me as. And now, she was going to learn what real emptiness felt like. She had no idea it was the last morning she'd ever wake up to the smell of my coffee. I brewed it slowly, longer than usual. Not because I needed it. I'd already packed the last of my things the night before. Not in a suitcase. I didn't want it to look like a departure. I wanted it to feel like evaporation. My clothes, folded and vacuum sealed in a friend's guest room 2 towns over. My toothbrush, replaced with an identical one so she wouldn't notice the swap. The books I cared about, gone. The ones I left behind were the ones I never opened anyway. When she walked into the kitchen that morning, her hair tied up, half asleep and yawning into her robe, she barely glanced at me. She mumbled something about a dentist appointment, asked if I had fed the cat. I said yes, even though the cat had been living with my sister for 3 days. She didn't notice. She didn't notice the car keys were different. That I was using a rental I parked 2 streets over. That my eyes were dry, finally, and not from crying, but from watching someone forget me while standing 5 feet away. "I might be late tonight," she said, sipping her coffee. "Work thing." I nodded, and then I did it. I handed her a small envelope and said, "I forgot to give you this last week." She blinked, took it, tucked it into her purse without opening it. That envelope would sit there all day, probably unnoticed until the exact moment she reached for her wallet at dinner with whichever man she thought would never become what I had been. By the time she read it, I would be long gone. I left at 9:46 a.m. Not with a bang, not with a slammed door, but with the quiet pull of a lock clicking shut behind me. Soft, final, hollow. I didn't leave a note on the fridge. I didn't text her. I didn't block her. I vanished the way she'd always pretended I wasn't in the room. She didn't know where I'd gone. She still doesn't. What she found instead was worse than any confrontation I could have given her. That evening, she texted me at 7:12 p.m. "Hey, are you picking up dinner or should I grab something?" I didn't reply. At 8:03, another text. "Are you home?" Then the call started. 9 missed ones by midnight. 3 voicemails I didn't listen to. But it was the photo she sent me at 2:15 a.m. That told me everything I needed to know. It was a picture of the envelope, torn open, and sitting next to it, on our now empty kitchen table, was the one thing she never thought I'd take. The clock from her side of the bed. The one that always ran 5 minutes fast. The one she never let me adjust. The one she used to call my anchor in the morning. I left the house, but I took the one object that marked her rhythm, that grounded her routines, that she owned. Because I wanted her to wake up every day and stare at that empty space on the nightstand, feeling the absence she used to dismiss as ordinary. Inside the envelope, nothing dramatic, no rage, no insult, just a small folded note that read, "You were right. I don't do things like this, but I do remember when someone stops choosing me." I don't know what her face looked like when she read it. I don't need to. I know the silence that follows betrayal. I lived in it long enough. Now it's hers. It's strange how quiet peace is. Not the silence of holding back words or tiptoeing through someone else's moods, but actual peace. The kind where you wake up without dread sitting on your chest, where the clock on your nightstand ticks without judgment, and the air feels like it belongs to you again. That's where I live now. It's been 6 months. I moved to a small town 2 hours west, the kind of place where no one cares who you used to be. I rent the top floor of an old craftsman house owned by a retired woodworker named Gene, who makes birdhouses and talks like every sentence might be his last. The place smells like cedar and old coffee, and it's the first home I've lived in that actually feels like mine. I freelance now. Same kind of work, data analysis, spreadsheets, migration tools, but without the rigid 9 to 5. I take walks. I eat alone without feeling lonely. And on Thursdays, I go to a bookstore cafe where the owner, Kendra, always mispronounces my name on purpose and laughs when I pretend to be offended. She's sharp, kind. She's not someone I'm chasing. And maybe that's why she's so easy to be around. But I know what you're wondering. Did Riley ever reach me? Yes. 2 months ago, I got an email. Subject line, "Please." The message was short. "I don't know where you are. I don't know how you disappeared like that. But every night since, I stare at the place where your clock used to be. I didn't realize how loud your absence could be. Please let me explain. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was losing. I read it once, then again, then I deleted it. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because healing isn't about giving someone another chance to rewrite your scars. It's about learning to read your own story without skipping the painful chapters. She had been right about one thing. I didn't do things like that. Until I finally did. And it saved my life. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if someone makes you feel invisible while you're standing right in front of them, you're allowed to walk away. Quietly. Completely. Even if you've never done it before. Especially if you've never done it before. Thanks for listening to my story. If you made it this far, I'd love to know. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Have you ever had a moment where silence said more than words? Let us know down in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true emotional journeys. Right here on Reddit Confessions. See you in the next one.